Welcome back, Bobs and Roberts. So we're doing something a little bit different today. As you can see, I thought it might be fun for us to draw our favorite Animal Crossing characters together, right? That might be fun. So we're just going to try it. We're going to start with everybody's favorite curatorial night owl, the paleontological avian himself, the Blathman, Dr. Blathers, the owl. You can kind of see, so I already did my line work because that takes it takes a long time, and it's just kind of frustrating, I imagine, for you to watch, because it's a lot of putting down a line and erasing it and then putting down a different line, and no, that looks bad, erasing that, putting down a different line, no, that's not right, erase that. So it's just a very repetitive process that's not very interesting, in my opinion, just because I do it all the time. But if you would like to see that, definitely let me know. And I can definitely show the process with like the shapes and all of the erasing and everything. I can definitely do that if you're interested, but just know it will make the video sizably longer. So up to you. So yeah, we are just gonna start with all Blathers here, and for my style, I like to use mixed media, and by mixed media I mean markers and colored pencils. So I like to lay down a base of marker so that I can get a nice, solid, smooth base to then build up the highlights and shadows. Well, I guess it's just shadows that I build up with the colored pencil on top of it. But it saves both my markers and colored pencils from being run down too quickly. And it's just nice. It just gives it a nice look, I think. And so I just like how it looks. So when using this type of technique with the markers and the colored pencils, you want to make sure to lay down the lightest colors first. It's kind of counterintuitive to painting or traditional oil paint, where you would want to lay down your darkest colors first and then work that way. And we're doing this so that later on, when we add in the dark colors, we don't have to be too careful now if we get into an area that's supposed to be a darker color, because it's gonna be covered up by that darker color later on. So it's just kind of saving us a little bit of stress and worry right off the bat. And also, if you put down a darker color first and then accidentally run across that darker color with a lighter color later on, you run the risk of smudging or bleeding that darker color into our lighter area. So it's just easier this way, it's smarter this way. So we're just going to work from light to dark, and we're also going to try to cover the biggest chunks of area at a time, and I'll show you what I mean as I go. So since we did that nice little pale yellow of his face, let's just go ahead and do his beak next, because it is right there and it is also yellow. So the markers that I use are these ones right now that I'm using are Prismacolor, which are actually not my favorite to use. I would actually prefer Copic markers, but those are very expensive. Or there's another brand, it's kind of like a bit of a discount brand, Copic, and that brand is called Mepxy, Mepxy, and both Copic and Mepxy, they just kind of glide nicer and they blend nicer with the other strokes that you've done. I find Prismas to be kind of hard to blend with each other for some reason. It's, for how expensive they are, you think that they would blend nicely, but I just find that I prefer other markers, and that's just my preference. Like, if you prefer Prismacolor, I'm not saying that you're wrong by any means. Do what you enjoy. So now we're just gonna do his little, it's kind of like an Argyle sweater pattern on his little belly here. So we're just gonna go ahead and fill that in. Now with marker, what you want to do, it doesn't matter so much in the small spaces like these little dots on his, I'm gonna call them his eyebrows because I don't know the technical term. I tried to look it up, I promise you guys I did, but nowhere would tell me what these like great horned owl like eyebrow things were technically scientifically called. So we're just gonna call them eyebrows, and that's gonna have to be okay. But yeah, when you're working with markers, you want to try to maintain one pattern or one consistent direction the whole time. Like, you don't want to, I'll show you what I mean with a bit of a bigger area. So let's do his tie next so you can kind of see what I mean. So I like to firstly outline so that we have a nice place to start and finish, because when you're working with really any media, but especially markers, wherever you put your marker down first, it's going to have the most pigment on the page. So you don't want to constantly be putting your marker down and then picking it up and then putting it down if you want a nice smooth color payoff, a nice smooth base. And then with that outlining, so we're just going to put our marker down and then drag, and you want to follow that consistent kind of pattern, that consistent stroke for the whole way across, and that way you're getting a nice consistent base to work on top of. If you change direction midway through, so let's say I'm going like this and then I change to this, those are not going to blend nice together, and now it looks like kind of like a mistake because you're going to have a hard pigmented spot where those two patterns that you're doing, those two stroke lengths meet, and we're trying to avoid that. We want this to look very nice, very put together, and very purposeful. We want to be very purposeful with the things that we are doing with our strokes and with our lines. Everything is on purpose. So now I should have done his little legs and feet when I was doing his beak because they are the same color. So we're going to go back to that color and just kind of fill in his little leggies and his little chicken feet. I know he's not a chicken, but all bird legs and bird feet look the same. Don't come for me, zoologists. So yeah, when it's a smaller area like this, the stroke direction, it doesn't matter as much because obviously when things get that small and that compact, you're not able to see it. It all just kind of mushes and blends together anyway. So it's not as much of a problem in the smaller areas, but when we get into his body, it is going to be much more important to pay attention to our strokes that we're using and how we're we're putting down color. So now I'm going to do his little cheeks. Nice little pink color for his cheeks here. And then another little cheek over here. Now this style with the marker and the colored pencil, I hardly think that I am the first person to do this or first person to come up with this. Like, it just seems useful, right? Like, put down a marker base and then go over top of it to give it a little bit of life, give it a little bit of accent with colored pencil. That seems kind of obvious. But for me, it just kind of came out of necessity. Because when I was younger, all I wanted was just some oil paints so that I could be like the legend himself, Bob Ross. We all know Bob Ross, R.I.P. Bobby. And I would sit there and get all my stuff ready, because that was back when a show would come on at the same time every day. I don't know if that's still how it works. I haven't watched actual TV in a while. But yeah, back in the day, the same show would come on at the same time every day. So I would get my paper ready. I would get my acrylic paints. We didn't have oil paints because they were messy. And they are. But yeah, we wouldn't, I would have to kind of like jerry rig my own Bob Ross setup. I would have to work around the tools that I didn't have. I didn't have that big, what does he use? It's like a 5-inch, 6-inch big brush that he uses to put down his liquid white onto the canvas. I didn't have a canvas. Canvas is very expensive. I don't know that I've ever painted on canvas just because I'm too worried that I'm gonna mess it up, and for how expensive it is. It's kind of like getting a tattoo. Like, do I really have anything that important to put on a canvas that I can justify spending that money just to like mess it up? No. So yeah, I've never really experimented with canvas. I'd like to. I mean, that would be nice to see how that feels, but there's so much prep involved with canvas, and then you have to wait for it to dry if you're using oil paints. So yeah, oil paints are just kind of a bear in general. And I would love to use oil paints, but I really only use paint for more hyper-realist things because they blend so nicely together. For a style like this, like a more cartoony storybook, children's book kind of style, the markers and colored pencils lend themselves really beautifully to this style. And like I said, I just like how it looks. Like it looks very effortless. And it's kind of a simple way to achieve a very sophisticated type look, in my opinion. So yeah, if you are short on resources or space, like markers and colored pencils, they don't really take up a lot of space, and they can get expensive, but it's nowhere near the expense of all those paints and canvas and brushes. So it's pretty cost effective too. Just like a nice, oops, I forgot a little spot. It's just a nice look that is also, it's just very like economical, in my opinion. So if you have been looking, like if you are into drawing or art, but you don't really have the funds, you don't really have the resources, I would super duper recommend trying something like this. And you don't need anything expensive. You don't need Prismacolor markers, you don't need Prismacolor colored pencils. I use Faber-Castell colored pencils, which are stupid expensive, but that's just because I have a sick and disgusting obsession with art supplies. Some people collect shoes, some people work on cars, some people like clothes. I love art supplies. I love paper, I love markers, I love colored pencils. I love it all. So that is where I choose to do damage to my wallet, is on art supplies. And I don't feel bad about it at all, because I know it's going to get used. Probably a little too quickly, but that's what it's there for, right? The materials are there to be utilized. So yeah, if you are interested in art or drawing and you don't really know where to start, you can pick up some markers. Like I said, they don't have to be expensive. As long as you use your tools correctly, I don't think you have to shell out a lot of money. It's like, you don't need an expensive oven to be a baker. You don't need an expensive camera to be a photographer. You don't need, you don't need Jordans to be a basketball player. Like, you don't need expensive things to do what you're passionate about. You kind of work with what you have, work around it, make it work for you. Although there is a difference between not paying a lot and just having like cheap supplies. And I wouldn't recommend going super duper cheap. Like, there are ways, there are ways to stick to a budget, to be budget friendly and still get a good product. You just do a little bit of research, test some different things out. Like, you can buy markers by the each, you can buy single markers. So buy like a gray marker and see how that grabs you. Use it a lot, use it with different papers. Just experiment with it. Experiment with a whole bunch of different art supplies and paper. Paper is my favorite. I love paper. Digital art, I like it, don't get me wrong. I use digital art. I use Procreate on the iPad when I want to do oil type hyper-realist paintings, but to me, nothing will ever replace paper. I just love paper so much. I think that might be my favorite art supply. I will go to the store, the art store, and just spend like 30 minutes in the paper row, just feeling the paper, touching the paper, like imagining how it's gonna feel with, this media. Ooh, how are my colored pencils gonna feel on this paper? How would markers feel on this paper? Like, I wonder what kind of texture this paper would give me with this media, And it's just the best row. It is so good. With that said, the paper that I'm using right now is Canson brand marker paper. It's on the back of this paper pad that I'm using is not it, else I would just flip it over and show you, but it's like a purple cover and it just says marker really big on it. and it is my all-time favorite paper. It will just make your markers feel like an absolute dream. It is beautiful, beautiful paper. So now I'm just gonna do very basic shadows over here on this fossil. And so when you're doing shadows, you haven't got to the shading yet because I usually take care of the shading with colored pencils. But when you get to the shading, make sure that you are maintaining a consistent light source. So give yourself a pretend light source. Like for me, I usually like to make mine kind of like up and diagonal, and that gives the character the best shape in my opinion. Like I don't know if you guys have ever seen that it's like a GIF or a video where they show what that woman looks like with the different angles of light on her, and she looks like a completely different person. It's like 360 degrees around her, like different lights, and they do each one at its own time. And it's, you wouldn't think it would make that big of a difference, like which direction your light is coming from, but it really does. It's incredible. So I find that like up and from like one of the diagonals gives me the nicest shape that I'm going for, and it's subtle. We're not going for like a harsh light. We're not going for anything crazy. There you go. Now Blathers has eyes. He's looking at you. Hi Blathers. Can you assess these fossils for me, please? Oh, we already have all of these? Awesome. My island is never going to give me the 2 fossils that I need. Even better. So now, where should we start for shading? Let's just start with him. Let's just start with the brown. The brown on his body. Is this going to be dark enough? Let's see. Yeah, that's good for now, and then we'll add another darker color to it, and it'll be like a nice little gradation. Because I like, in this style, I like for my shadows to be have a nice gradient to them. So what that means is we're not doing like a harsh shadow line and then it's like a very stark, like the shadow would be black and then the highlight would be white. I'm just trying to make a nice stepped, not even stepped, it's just like a nice gradient. That's the only way for me to describe it. From dark to light. And yeah, nothing too stark, no hard edges here. Just nice, soft changes from one color to another. So in this stage, as you can see, I'm just kind of laying down where he would be darker based on our light source, from our pretend light source coming from up here. So everything on this side of him is going to be the darkest, and everything that's going to be throwing a shadow, everything that hits the light first is going to throw a shadow onto the figure behind it or next to it. So he's actually going to be pretty dark down here, but we're going to use another color to really make it that much darker. And I like to use kind of like these little circle movements, and I start, again, like I said with the marker, you want to start where you want the most pigment, and then, so put your media down where you want the most pigment, and then just ease out from there. So underneath this little eyebrow is going to have a little bit of a shadow coming off of it. So we're going to make that very noticeably harder line, and then just blend it out nicely. So then we're going to go deepen up the shadow. You don't have to go in like, if you're thinking that something about your drawing is looking a little bit off, or it doesn't have as much punch to it as you might want, or you don't even know what the issue is, it just doesn't look right, I would say it's probably because your shadows are not saturated enough. Like in your shadows, you want them to be the darkest part on the figure. Like in your darkest shadows, you want that to be like dark, and you shouldn't be afraid to use black in the darkest parts of your shadows. Do not be afraid of the blackest black in your shadows, because that's going to give it that nice contrast. Like the more contrast you have from light, the lightest light on your figure to the darkest dark, it's just going to make it more visually interesting, and it's going to make it feel a lot better to look at. So underneath his little chicken wing here, we're going to give him another darken up the shadow, because this part here under his body and under his wing is probably going to be like the darkest part of his body, since it's seeing 0 of our light source, and it's also underneath another figure. So when I say figure, I just mean like we can have several different figures on the same character. I'm just trying to break him up into figures that are going to accept light and throw shadows. And so if you break it up like that, it's going to make it a lot more manageable to get your shadows correct and to get those shapes correct. So whenever the light source hits one of those figures, you have to think about the shape of the figure that the light is hitting, but also the shape that is going to be projected as a shadow from the figure that's throwing the shadow. So the shadow that's coming from his head is going to be like a circular shape, but it also needs to follow the curvature of this wing here. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill that shadow in. And see, that's totally fine to do too. Like if you know that you're going to have a pretty dark shadow, you can give it that little outline so that you know kind of like how far it's going to be thrown, like how much you need to fill in, and then go and fill that all in, and then kind of soften it out from there. And then this under part of his wing here is we're just going to follow the shape of the wing, and then still continuing. So we are going to go in with another, like a darker brown, so do not fear if this isn't looking dark enough in your opinion, because I agree, but we're not done yet, so do not fear. It's just the first coat, the base coat. So now let's go up to his little eyebrows. I don't know, please somebody tell me what these things are called on an owl, because I feel silly calling them eyebrows, unless that is actually like what zoologists and animal scientists what refer to them as. Please enlighten me if you know. I would love to know as well. I like to learn, especially about animals. I have no idea about a lot of things about animals, but I do love animals. Hence why I play the game. So now I'm just kind of giving on things. They don't always have to, when you're adding these darker accents, they don't necessarily always have to be a shadow. You can just throw them in to use as an accent. Like it's just gonna give it more character and more dimension to your drawing if you use it correctly. Obviously we are using it mostly for shadows, and that's fine. But yeah, if you want to give it a little bit of texture, a little bit of dimension, just feel free to like go and give it, yeah, just a little bit more texture wherever you think it might need it with that, with those low lights. We'll call them low lights. So now let's do, since we are on his brown body, let's keep that going and just go in with a little bit of a darker shade. Now, like I mentioned, these colored pencils that I use are Faber-Castell Polychromos. Polychromos, they're just colored pencils. And they are wonderful. They are so nice. I like them because they are so buttery and so beautiful to use, and they kind of do all the work for you, in my opinion. Like, they blend with each other so nicely. It makes such light work out of blending and making a gradient. But like I said, they are very expensive, so I'm not saying that you need these colored pencils. I just like them a lot. But up before I bit the bullet and got these colored pencils, I was using, like, honestly, the Crayola colored pencils, really not bad. A set of Prismacolor colored pencils, I don't think is too expensive. I don't remember now, but yeah, Prismacolors are fine. They're just kind of like a normal, like, hard colored pencil, like a hard pigment. And I prefer, so why the Fabers are so nice is because they're hard and they don't give a lot of what the beauty community refers to as kick up or fallout, or just general like colored pencil debris, pigment debris, when you're going in and laying down a whole bunch of color. They're very smooth and they feel soft the way that they blend with the other pigments, but you get no kick up, no pigment debris whatsoever, and that is wonderful in my opinion. Like, nothing worse than when you're putting your hand down like this and there's like a little bit of pigment here, and then you pick your hand back up and now it's just like a smudgy mess. Now it looks like you don't know what you're doing. Looks so silly. Ruined my whole piece just because I couldn't keep my grubby hands off of it. So these do not do that. These are so wonderful. Even when you are sharpening them, they don't do that thing. You guys know the thing. Like when you sharpen a pencil and it does the thing where it's like one side doesn't get sharp at all, and then this side is like way down here, and now you have to like use it on the side forever, or you have to keep sharpening it and wearing it down to a nub just for it to be usable again. These do not do that. So wonderful. I don't know how, like, what kind of voodoo magic Faber-Castell is using to achieve this, but you know, I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to be thankful, because by far the greatest colored pencils I have ever used, honestly. But yeah, no, you don't need to start off like definitely don't think right off the bat you need to start off with something like these, because you don't. Work your way up to it. It'll be a nice little treat for you when you feel like you've earned it. All right, so we are just keeping darkening up those darkest spots here. Maybe around his leg, like where his leg meets his body should be a little bit darker as well. Okay. That is coming along. Now, usually in this style, I would go over, we're not done yet. We're not really close to done yet, but usually I would go around it with a black line and outline everything, and then go in with a smaller black line and outline everything on the inside. And I haven't decided if I want to do that with this yet, or if we want to leave it as kind of like a open, lineless, lawless Blathers. I don't know. I'll just have to see how we feel when it's all done. If it feels like it can stand alone without those outlines, then we'll just leave it. It is literally a zero risk situation. So now his tie is calling to me. So let's go ahead and get into a little bit of dimension on the tie. So like we said, our light source is coming from up here. It actually kind of is today. That's funny. So all of our shadows on these figures as well are going to follow that same thing that we just did with Blather's body. So they're going to stick to the lower left, the southwest, the southwest of the figure. And we are just going to build those up with kind of like a mid-tone color, because since we put down the lightest color as the base with the marker, the second one that we're going to go in with would be like a mid-tone, just to kind of give us that like nice step in between light and the dark of the shadow. So now we have a place to kind of have everything settle. Now let's go in with a little bit darker. Nice green tie, green little bow tie. So it's really darken up. Start real dark, and then we can kind of blend our way up until they meet nicely. And when you're using graphite or colored pencil, another thing that might be throwing you off, if you're wondering why your piece looks a little bit weird or it's looking off, you know, all the same things that I said before, like, you know, it came out fine, it just needs a little something extra and you don't know what it is. It could be because you're not pressing hard enough with your media. So you want to make sure when you are putting down a layer of any color, I guess with regular graphite it's a little bit more difficult to enforce that because you only have the one shade, or you only have the one color, and you're trying to achieve different shades with the one color. So it's kind of paramount to press lighter and then press really dark to get those different shades, that different gradient. But with colored pencil, what you want to make sure that you're doing is always putting down a solid amount of that color and then build in the shades, the shadows with different colors, and that's going to give you the most impact. So that's why I'm using several colors to achieve a shadow, because I want to make sure that I'm putting down the full pigment of those colors that I'm choosing. And then the colors themselves will gradiate. I think I just made that term up, but gradient and radiate out to where they kind of need to be. So that looks nice. I feel like I want it to be even, maybe even a little bit darker in those shadows. So let's take an even darker green and just at the very, very darkest point, the point that doesn't see any sun, and where things meet is also a very dark shadow space. So like creases on things, creases on your body, like if you bend your arm in half and see like where your forearm meets your upper arm, that crease is going to be the darkest shadow in there, like almost just like a black line. So yeah, where figures meet is going to be the darkest area, the darkest shadow on the piece, and then also just things that are like never going to see the sun. The complete opposite side of where your light source is. Okay, so that's very cute. It has a lot of dimension to it. It has a lot of volume to it. With just a couple different, just what did we use? Three colored pencils on that tie, and look at how much it's popped already just from that base of green that we put down. It's so effortless. So now his little cheeks are calling to me. So what color do I want to use? This one might be like dead on to what we just put down. Oh, okay, that's fine. So in the case of his cheeks, this is going to be something where it's like, they're not orbs, right? They're not 3D orbs sitting on his face. They're flush with his face, but I do want to give them a little bit of dimension themselves and a little bit of texture, a little bit of character. Just add in more depth, more dimension. So we're just going to use that darker shade as just an accent. We're not trying to allude to any type of three-dimensional object here. We're just simply giving it more dimension than it had. And another nice way to add dimension is by using a complementary color, the color directly across from the one that you're using on the color wheel, and that is just going to bring in a nice just dimension. Usually those two colors together, so that kind of like fuchsia magenta-y color, the opposite of pink is green, so, or the opposite of red is green, so the opposite of pink is going to be kind of like a greenish yellow. So let's go ahead and grab this like lime green, and it's simply to add dimension. Like you shouldn't really be able to see the green in it. It's just going to give it a little something something, a little je ne sais quoi, and nobody looking at the piece is going to be like, oh, is there green in his cheeks? Why would you do that? No, because it's just there. It's not there to be noticeable as a color. It is simply there to just bring dimension, bring more colors to it, because things in life, if you look around, not everything is just one color. Like usually things are made up of lots of colors. Like white, especially if you look at the color white, that has so many different colors in it. It's bizarre to try and draw snow, let me tell you, because it's not just white. It's got literally every single color in it. So this little bottom part of his beak is going to be darker Then the shadows that I'm going to put on the top part of his beak, again, probably more scientific, anatomical words that I don't know. Like, I'm sure the top beak is called something different than the bottom beak, just like how our chin is like the mandible, and then like our top lip is something else entirely. I don't I couldn't even tell you. Listen, this is why I'm an artist, okay? I don't know about all this stuff. I don't know about anatomy, and I don't know about zoology. I'm not an expert, so I'm sorry. Sorry, you guys. I try to do my research as much as I can. Try to learn as much as I can. But there's always going to be something that I don't know. And that's okay. I think that's exciting, right? Like, if you know everything, where does that leave you? That leaves you zero room for growth, right? So if there's still stuff that you don't know, what a world of possibilities that awaits you to just find out things that you don't know. And you don't even know the things that you don't know, which is also crazy exciting. Okay, so on a shape like this, where it's kind of like rounded, I usually try to leave a little strip of the lighter shade, because that's going to be, I think it's reflected light, so it's just going to be, the way the light wraps around rounded objects is it's gonna be the darkest right here, and then that reflected light that's bouncing around the rounded shape is gonna peek in from that darkest side, and that's gonna give it even more of the shape that we want. And now there's a definite separation from his top beak to his bottom beak. And that's a very simple way to achieve a style that you're looking for. If you can see that, just the ever so slight, just a sliver of that lighter color. So now that we are good with that, let's go in with an even darker brown. So my favorite part about all of this, about most things, is the colors. Like, I love, and I think that's why I like working with markers and colored pencils, because I like to figure out the right colors to use. Even if you're working from a reference, you're still going to need to figure out those colors, like the proper colors to use and what colors are going to give you the right effect. And that's my absolute favorite part, is figuring out colors and like, what's this shade? What's this color? What color would go well with this one? And I cannot get enough of color picking and figuring out shades and trying to make them match up, and what's going to be a nice shadow color for this color. Oh, you know what? I put those away too soon because I keep forgetting he has legs. So I'm going to start the bottom of his foot here is going to be the darkest part on either of these legs, because it is not seeing any sun whatsoever. It is facing away from everything. It is underneath the darkest part of his body. So this foot here is going to be, yeah, the underside of his foot is going to be the darkest part of his legs. So now here, I'm going to kind of flesh out a nice little shadow shape, because we're taking into consideration the figure that's throwing the shadow, which would be his round body, and then the figure that is accepting the shadow, which is this little stick leg, this little twig leg. And there we go. That's kind of like a nice, that's giving that a nice little shape. So then under here would be the same deal. It's going to be darker on the inside, because remember, the light is coming from over here. So just darken that up. And then also where the leg meets the foot is going to be dark. And then this side of this talon, I'm going to call it a toe because that's funnier to me. So there we go. And then we'll go in with that darker brown. Also, I'm sorry if me getting these colored pencils is incredibly loud and obnoxious for you to hear. I apologize. And if it's not, then bonus. Great job, team. By team, I mean me. It is just me. So there we go. Nice little dark shadow here. Give those little legs some shape. He's been working out. He's been lifting fossils. He's been lifting all of those fake sculptures that Red has been selling. Somebody's got to move him, right? And I think Blathers does it all on his own. He needs an assistant. Maybe if Brewster shows up, Brewster can help him with his curatorial duties. And then just the whole bottom of this foot. So I'm sure you're wondering, like, if I was just going to cover the whole thing in this darker brown, why even bother with that middle tone? Especially because we're not even really using it. Again, just for dimension. Like, it's just kind of so that that lighter shade kind of peeks through in some places. And just give it, yeah, more of a real world feel to it. Although, yeah, like this style is not meant to be hyper realist by any stretch of the imagination. It's just supposed to be fun and whimsical and storybook-like. And I like it. So now we have the white parts left. So let's go ahead and let's finish up his little body. Let's finish his little Argyle sweater belly and try, I don't think this is going to be dark enough to really do anything, but I just wanted to see. Okay, yeah, while we have the white out, let's see what it looks like up here. It looks like literally nothing. So yeah, that's why we start light and then go dark, just in case, like, if this was the wrong color or the wrong shade and we just went right in with a super duper dark color, that doesn't really leave us much room for error. And you might think I'm being a little bit too careful, but just trying to not ruin something that we're working so hard on, you know? So that is a little bit better. Just gonna lightly follow the shape of the eye while being mindful of the other shapes around it. It's gonna be even darker here on the inner corner because that's where a lot of shapes are meeting, and that's also the farthest point from the light source on this particular object. And by object, again, what do I mean? Just the eye object on this character, the eye figure, the eye sphere shape. There we go. We can even bring it out a little bit further. I don't want to make it too dark, but that gives it a little bit of shape, and now you know it's a sphere instead of just a flat. Like, look at this one compared to this one. Like, we have brought life to Blather's eyes, and it feels pretty good. Feels pretty good to bring a character to life. So now I'm just gonna do that same thing, and then if we remember that thing I said about reflected light, the same for the beak, I'm gonna do kind of that same thing on this eye to give it that last stop off before it hits, I guess I feel like the eye socket. I don't know what to call that area. Oh, I just remembered we haven't filled in, we haven't shaded his face area yet, so we'll do that next. Just this eye is kind of weird because he has like the beak kind of maybe giving it a little bit of a shadow off to it, and then he also has the eyebrow. It's giving a little bit of a shadow off, so it's a little bit strange. Try and combine all of these shapes into something cohesive, but I think we can do it. Let's try. Let's just try. You never know until you try. And if it doesn't look right, then we've learned something for next time. That's all you can do. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just take what you learned and utilize it in the next scenario where it's applicable, right? That's literally all you can do, is just live and learn. Right? Like what more can you do besides that? Live and learn. You can't read minds. You can't predict the future. Just take each day for what it is. Maybe learn a little lesson and then move on. Let it go. Let that day go and enjoy what the next day has for you, the possibilities that the next day has. So now, looking over here, I kind of want this side to be a little bit darker, just slightly, ever so slightly darker, to kind of really give it that round spherical dimension that we're looking for. So I'm going to blend that out, trying not to make it too dark, although this eye, like I said, would be darker. Or did I say that? I don't know. If I didn't say that, I meant to. I'm saying it now. So this eye would be a little bit darker because it's on the farther side. And I know that feels strange because they're both white. So to have one eye kind of like gray feels a little odd, but we're just gonna go with it. Now I'm gonna take that lighter shade that didn't really show up, and I'm gonna just kind of blend the edges here into a nicer, I just fear if I keep using that color, I was just using that darker color, that I'm gonna look up and his whole eye is just gonna be a darker gray color. So I'm gonna blend out with the lighter shade, which is another nice feature of colored pencils, is you can take a lighter shade or you can take white. That's a very common technique, is to take a white colored pencil and blend together any colors that might need it. But this works too. Just take like a couple steps lighter of the shade that you were using and blend it that way as well. Either or, whichever one you have. It's just, I think it's just easier to like buy a singular white colored pencil than it would be to be like, can I get gray number 2.5-0? I don't know. Okay, so now we are going to focus on his little facial area here. Kind of like light yellowy area that's sitting inside of, like between his eyes and between the rest of his face. Again, don't know what to call this area. I'm sure it has a very specific name that I don't know. Again, please feel free to enlighten me if you know bird anatomy, bird law, definitely feel free to enlighten me. Like I said, I always love to learn. Always want to learn new things, especially about animals. So yeah, here we go. Blathers getting a little bit of color to his cheeks. He's coming alive. He's ready to dance the night away at the museum that he works at by himself. I feel so bad for Blathers. He needs a friend or a house. Like, let him go home. Why are you making him work 24 hours a day? Where is the museum's HR person, honestly? All right. Little dimension, and then we will go ahead and darken up the things that need to be darkened a little bit. So where the forms are meeting, right around here, and they would also be giving off a little bit of a shadow as well. And then over here it's just going to be darker because that's the farthest point from our light source. Starting to get closer to it though, so not quite as dark as down here, but still pretty dark. There we go. He's coming together. He's starting to look like something, like a happy guy, ready to assess fossils. So we had a bit of a detour there. So now I'm going to come back down here to his sweater and darken up the white spots. So the good part about gray is that it's just kind of like a universal shadow color. And so there's nothing wrong with using gray to darken up other colors. But if you are looking for a way, again, like everything is just about adding more dimension or adding a little bit of pop that you might not have known what was missing from your piece. So if you've been using gray or black on top of your other colors to kind of give them a shadow, again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's gonna look a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more cohesive if you use just either in a style like this, just a darker color of the color that you've already used. So like in the case of the tie here, we're just using a really dark green to give us our shadows, but in a more realistic, hyper-realistic piece, you would also throw in, like we did in the cheeks, the complementary color. So for the green tie like that, we would throw in just a little bit of red into the shadows, and that's going to darken it up in a very realistic way, and that will definitely give your piece the thing that it needs. Just a little extra added oomph, if I may. So now, since we got the grays in there, now we have to focus on the browns in his sweater belly. So this part over here. Now for this, we're going to want to be a little bit more careful because I don't want the brown in the white part of his belly. So this is a little bit more difficult because now we have to be cognizant of the little square shapes, like triangular square shapes of the pattern on his belly, but also being aware of how the shadow is wrapping around him. So a little bit more difficult like this because there's so many shapes in play, so many shapes to kind of keep your mind focused on. But it's kind of like, it's like a challenge, and it's fun in my opinion. You gotta make it work, gotta make it all work together, make all the shapes play nice together. So I think a little bit darker down here, a little bit darker over here, maybe blend that. There we go, that doesn't look too bad. So then where else? Let's go ahead and do, oh, you know what? These little things, I keep forgetting that we have so many more white spaces than we actually do. So let's do his little fingertip feathers. Darken those up. And that would be like the only reason why I would want to outline this with black marker, so that you can really see these fingertip parts, unless we can really shade it up properly. But let's see what we can do with just shading. So yeah, it's gonna start, so I'm starting where it's darkest, and then I'm just gonna kind of lighten it up as we get to the lightest part. See, that doesn't look bad. This side looks good. So then the darkest here, and lighten it up. And see, okay, like yeah, that's fine. That works for me. Maybe let's try that same strategy over here, just to kind of bring out these shapes that we're working with as the pads of his fingers. Okay, you know what, I can get on board with that. I think that looks pretty good. So now we will move over to the fossil, since we have gray in hand. So this shape is going to be a little bit difficult because it's got like the spiral, and it's pretty small. So the areas that are accepting light and giving off shadows and accepting shadows are kind of all condensed down into a very small area. So it's going to be difficult to try and keep everything neat and tidy, but let's see what we can do. So I imagine that this coil here is sticking up a little bit more than down here, and same with the inner coil. So that's gonna kind of gradient out over here. And then the bottom part is also going to have a shadow because this coil is kind of like a rounded coil as well. So it's not just round this way, it's also round, like if you uncoiled it, it would be from like a rounded snake that we all used to make with Play-Doh. You know what I'm talking about. And so then we're going to try to gradient that up so slightly, without making it muddy or getting in the way of anything else. And then same with down here where it's meeting the base of the fossil. Just taking things really slow. It's no rush. We'll get there when we get there. And then just gonna darken up. Actually, I think I might take another color to darken up the inner coils there. So then same with our stars. So they are getting the least amount of light over here, and also on this little side and this little cutout. There we go. And same with here. They're kind of like little like raised stars. I like the fossils. They're just so darn cute. So let's go ahead. I wonder if this will be dark enough. Sorry. I wonder if this will be dark enough. Let's see. We might just have to get a black pencil out here for this part because we want it to be really, really, really dark in these crevices, these coils here. So I might have to go in with the black, which is nothing to be afraid of. It's just the only other part. Oh yeah, you know what? I thought I was gonna use black to darken up Blather's body even more too. So yeah, I thought I was maybe steering clear of black for some reason, but nope, we will break it out and use that as a little bit more dimension. So let's go ahead and do that while we're talking about it. Hopefully that's sharp enough. Nothing worse than when your tools are not sharp enough and you go to try and do a very precise thing and now it's just a mess. So make sure that your tools are properly prepped. You got everything ready to go. Obviously you could be sharpening them as you go as well, but I am not. So now let's make maybe this side a little bit darker and this side a little bit darker. Okay. Oh yeah. So darken up. We are all over the place. So usually I like to work by color. Like if I get one color out, I want to try to focus on everything that is that color. A lot of people like to work by area. So somebody might just focus on the head first and like finish all of that before they move on to anything else. And you know, there's no real wrong way to do it. Just whichever way it makes sense in your mind to keep it organized and to parse it out and so that it's still fun for you. Like if somebody else does it some way that doesn't seem fun to you, then don't do it that way. Make your own way that is exciting and fun for you. There are no rules in art, honestly. No rules whatsoever. It's like Outback Steakhouse. So all that matters, I mean, there are fundamentals that you definitely want to learn and abide by, but those fundamentals, I think any artist will tell you that the fundamentals are made to be broken. Like, the fundamentals are there so that you know how to break them properly. They are simply there so that you can go, oh, that was cool, and now I'm going to disregard that forever. Like, you want to learn them so that you know what you're doing, and so that you have so that you know what rules you're breaking, right? Like, that's why they're there. And so you have a steady foundation to stand on. So, like, by fundamentals, I mean color theory and basic anatomy, structure, shade and light, composition, that's a fundamental. There's a lot of fundamentals to art, but they are very, very much so meant to be broken. So let's also maybe do just a little bit of accent with black on the bottom part of this brow here. Just bring in that structure back. Okay. So now on to the base of the fossil. So we're going to take a darkish blue color, and we already know that we're going to kind of need this whole like extrusion to be a darker color so that we can see that it is in fact a three-dimensional object and not just a flat little thing. So we're just gonna give it some depth. This is actually physical depth, not metaphorical color depth. And then also get a little shadow where the little curlicue fossil would be throwing that shadow. Okay. And then for the stars are a little bit difficult, honestly. Such an odd shape to try and work around, especially in such a small little area like that. Like, that's difficult. So now even darker, I think this might be a nice shade. To go back to what I was saying about color, like this fossil was a really fun thing to try and figure out the color of, because it's like, it's blue, it's purple, what is it mostly? I don't know, do you? I don't know, do you? Is just very, very fun to try and narrow it down to like a base color and then some shadow colors that I could use. And like, what is the forward color? I think it's purple, but it's definitely purple with a blue base, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So there we go. Darken up the star shadows. All right. Are you seeing it? Is it all coming together for you? Looking very, very nice. Very much like something. So now I think what we need to do is give him something to stand on. So he needs, like where he's standing, he just needs the slightest bit of shading to make it seem like he is actually standing on the ground. Right, like he's standing on something, we know that. And then maybe this little guy gets a little bit of a shadow. Because he's still there, like we're still friends with the ground, we're just lifted off of him a little bit. So darken up that shadow where it needs to be darkened and throw it in the proper direction, which would be this way, because remember our light is coming from over here. So throw that, everything on this side is going to be darker. Good. There we go. Maybe put that back in Z space a little bit. Very nice. Now we still just have one little darken up, because where figures meet figures, they are what? The darkest shadows, exactly. So we're gonna just put in a finishing little touch there for the darkest shadow. Maybe just like a little bit. There we go. And there we have Dr. Blathers, our museum's own, our island's finest. Great horned owl. I think he's a great horned owl. There is some speculation as to which type of owl he is, but I choose to believe that he is a great horned owl because that's what That's what I said. And that's all there is to it. So there he is. Let's actually just, I always forget this part because, you know, who am I? Who am I to sign my name? What am I, an artist? So just boop, just right there. And there we have it. We have Blathers. So I hope you enjoyed this, you guys. I hope you maybe learned something. If you want to see the whole process from line work and building the character how I think he should look from the ground up, if you would like to see that, definitely let me know. If you enjoyed this type of video, please let me know. If you didn't enjoy it, please let me know. Not gonna hurt my feelings. Just either way, critique is very welcome here, so let me know either way. Anyway, thank you for hanging out, you guys. I love you so much. Come back for the next one. We'll draw all of your favorite characters. There are so many of them, and there's plenty of time, so I think we can draw all of them. So yeah, come back next time and see who we'll be drawing. All right, thank you guys. Love you. See you in the next one. Bye.